Let me introduce the next speaker, Cole Napper. He's going to present a speech with the topic Orgnostics People Analytics and Employee Listening Strategy to Make Business Impact During Times of Economic Uncertainty. Cole, welcome to the stage. It's all yours.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And just to clear this up, can everybody see my screen and can everybody hear me? We good?
Yes, loud and clear. Nice screen.
Awesome. Well, so I'm really excited to talk to you all today about how people analytics and listening can make an impact during times of economic uncertainty. A little bit about me, however. So I'm the VP of People Analytics for Orgnostic. I've been in the space for about 12 years. I'm actually the co-host of what I like to think is the best people analytics podcast called Directionally Correct. If you haven't checked it out and you're into podcasts, definitely check it out. I write articles on Substack. I lead a meetup group, background in IO psychology, and I mentor and advise some other organizations as well. But one of the things that you're going to get a sneak preview of today is my organization has done some research on what they see are some of the people analytics trends that are coming for 2023. However, if you haven't noticed, things seem to have changed recently. People analytics kind of came into its own between 2010 and 2020. And if you notice during that time period, there was one consistent theme of the economy, and I call it a theme of being up and to the right. All the economic indicators seem to be getting better and better every year. And so people analytics formative years were really crafted during this time period, and therefore people analytics has really only the muscle memory of dealing with that type of environment. But as we all are kind of experiencing, the economic conditions seem to be changing, and I want to dig into that a little bit in this presentation. But how does that affect people analytics? And maybe it's the end of our beginning, let's say. So inflation seems to be a big factor. If you're like myself, you're wondering, well, where on earth did this come from? I'm sitting back, my life, other than the pandemic, hasn't changed very much. But if you pull economic indicators, and I apologize, these are only for the United States, but the US has some of the best, record keeping for economic indicators in the world. What you see is there's something called the Federal Reserve in the US, and they have a mission and a mandate. And that mission and mandate is twofold. It's to create universal employment, which I'll get into that in a second, and to keep low inflation. And they particularly have a target for 2% inflation. And so that's what the arrow you see here. And so I started in January of 2010 because, again, that's when I really see people analytics came into its own. And I go into the current moment, and what you notice is inflation had stayed very constant during most of that time period, but very recently it's spiked quite a bit. So you might be wondering, why is that? And what impact does that have on people analytics? Well, as everyone who has a computer knows, ChatGPT came around last week and seems to be disrupting almost everything about how people ask questions and get answers to those questions. And so I decided, hey, I'll just ask ChatGPT, how is inflation affecting people analytics? Well, apparently nobody on the internet has considered this question, and so ChatGPT didn't have much of an answer. So hopefully this presentation will help you out today. But one thing I haven't seen in relation to inflation is, and I feel like it's been kind of overprescribed, what were some of the causes of inflation? But one I haven't seen is the money supply, which the Federal Reserve actually does control. If you look at it again, the money supply, so this is just the number of dollars that are floating out in the economy. You see a vast uptick right after the pandemic. And what does that have to do with inflation? Well, you increase the supply of something that also decreases the price of it. And therefore you saw, this is one of the causes of inflation, and it's due to multiple things. You had stimulus packages, legislation, a variety of things caused this to go up, but it's probably the steepest increase in the money supply that's ever occurred in the history of the United States. And so it's definitely worth noting as a cause. It also has a relationship to interest rates. So when interest rates are low, and they've effectively been zero during people analytics infancy, organizations can afford to take risk and maybe, make a few mistakes along the way and even afford a few more luxuries because credit is so cheap. But if you see, interest rates are going up, right? And that's directly a cause of the Federal Reserve because they control interest rates. And so what I mentioned earlier is their mandate is to do two things. One is to reduce inflation. And so they're going to raise interest rates until inflation gets back down to that 2% target that they've mentioned. But yeah, the other is full employment. And one of the things that you see here is the Fed's definition of full employment is 5%. So we're roughly around or just above 2.5% unemployment right now. And so they know they actually have a little bit of wiggle room to maybe make, and what you see is the interest rates are going up, layoffs are going up, but the Fed knows they have a little bit of wiggle room if those layoffs do end up causing the unemployment rate to tick up a little bit because they've got a little bit of a cushion. And so that's a little disconcerting if you're, a normal worker like I am. And so you're wondering, well, how does this affect people analytics? Well, when I think about the future of people analytics, obviously everybody's got their own crystal ball, but I like to think first about the past. The past of people analytics was very much so a time of plenty, a time of growth. Headcount was growing, resources were growing, technology was growing, spend was growing, budgets were growing. All of that was growing. But when I think about the future of people analytics, I can tell you what it's not. And it's not a manual future. Everything that's being manually done today will likely be automated in the future because the future is about scalability. All right. So if something is being done analog today, it's going to be digital in the future. And things in the past you may have trucked along in a linear manner. In the future, things you're going to see big spikes, and we've already seen that in a few of the graphs here on the screen. And the main thing that I know is that the future of people analytics is definitely not like the past. So what are some of those 2023 trends that my organization has researched within the context of an environment where we expect to see high inflation and economic conditions that might be less than favorable? Well, what we're seeing is organizations are going to see an increased pressure to understand and improve productivity. And especially in relation to things that, maybe haven't been a hot topic in people analytics for a little while, but things like scenario and workforce planning for cost modeling. The next is, and this goes back to that point about manual and analog versus digital and automated, is people analytics technology investments. But it's not just an investment for investment's sake. It's got to be focused on business problems and how you can fix those with the right business acumen in place. And then the last is because businesses know that, employee well-being is important to engagement and engagement is important to productivity. And what we're seeing is there perhaps might be a psychological recession, right? Not just an economic recession, but a psychological recession. So engagement and culture's contribution to productivity is going to be higher than ever. And therefore, employee listening is going to be a key component. So Orgnostic exists to tell the full story behind people analytics data. And it's really a key idea, which I don't know why other organizations haven't done this before Orgnostic, but to my knowledge, it's the first people analytics firm that was created to do two things. One is to start with employee listening, and the second is to marry that with people analytics platform. And how do they do this? It starts with our meta model. This is our single source of truth that takes data from all the sources. And this is built on data engineering practices from 2022, not 2010. And so we have a best-in-class data ingestion engine that cannot be replicated by anyone else. It's a universal taxonomy that's going to take data from any data source, compile it together into a structured way, and help you scale quickly. And so this is going to get to things like metrics, dashboards, and reports, predictive insights, or just use the data however you want with something like Tableau, Power BI, Looker. It could be anything. And these are going to be integrated with employee listening and survey data natively into a people analytics platform. And the beauty of it is, if we go back to earlier where we were talking about, well, what's going to happen in 2023? 2023 is going to be focused on improving and understanding productivity. Well, Orgnostic's base model for how it thinks about the employee experience is from the concept of employee lifetime value. And if you're not familiar with that concept, you should be. And it's shown here on the slide, which is showing what is the contribution an employee is making to the overall top line and bottom line of an organization throughout their employee life cycle, right? But our platform doesn't just stop there. It couples that with listening to the employee experience at all of those key touch points. And so that could be when a requisition opens, during hiring, onboarding, performance reviews. We want to know at those key milestones and those moments that matter, how are employees feeling and what's the culture like in the organization and how that is going to contribute to productivity. And so what Orgnostic is able to do is it's able to take all those data from those different data sources. It's able to enrich that data with things like employee surveys, diagnostics, data enrichment, and focusing on things like you may not think about, but data quality audits out of the box in our tool to help automate the work that's done. So it's no longer manual, but it's not just the basics. We even have a component we call data science on demand. So we're trying to disrupt not just manual reporting, but manual data science as well. And so if you want to use data science on demand, this is another component that we have. And we're doing things that, sometimes took standardization and governance and committees months, sometimes years to do out of the box by standardizing these metrics and creating actionable and prescriptive insights. So what are some examples of this and how is it related to inflation and what's going on with people analytics at the moment? Well, I'll start with the future at the bottom. We're rolling out very shortly a workforce planning and cost modeling tool. We're also looking at the labor market and looking at the data that's out there and trying to not just understand employee sentiment internally through employee listening, but employee sentiment externally as well. And then combining that with revenue and stock market data to show the value of employees' experiences and how that creates a direct linkage to the bottom line of firms. But we also got all of the key components that you would care about from advanced insights. We've got survival models, we've got spans and layers analysis, we've got pay equity work. You can benchmark against yourself and other companies. If you come together with your 5 key competitors, come to us and we will help you benchmark so that you can stay competitive with those firms in times like these. Alluvial charge for talent acquisition, internal comp equity box plots. And if DE&I is a very big focus for your organization, and I suspect it is, I believe we're the only firm that I know of that uses Simpson's index of showing the robustness of your DE&I. So most of the time, organizations are only able to compare males versus females or people of color versus majority groups or something along those lines. Simpson's index is able to compare amongst all different protected classes to show the robustness of your DE&I in your organization. But one of the reason why I really joined Orgnostic is because they're invested in the community. I have been you in the past. I've been a people analytics leader for years. I am you today. How do I stay abreast of what's going on? I have to learn what's the key cutting edge stuff that's going on. It's as far to my knowledge, Orgnostic created the first free people analytics certification. And the link you see on the screen here, it does work if you want to get out and scan the QR code. It's a free masterclass. They had over 3,000 people attend live when it first was published. They've recently reopened it just for people like you. And so you can use it for yourself. You can send it to your whole people analytics team. And we've even seen some organizations send it to their entire HRBP community because they're looking to build skills and capability in people analytics throughout their whole department. Well, you're able to do that with best-in-class knowledge from this type of masterclass. Similarly, we believe that people analytics can't happen and be democratized if it's behind the paywall. And so if you're only able to have, these type of discussions behind, some kind of pay for, entry consortium, well, that doesn't help democratize what we do. So we created a people analytics lounge. This is a Slack channel that has over 700 people analytics individuals from around the world. And we host monthly events. We host coffee chats. We host AMA sessions. ways of getting to know leaders in the field and your peers in the field for what's going on. I personally moderate it myself, and I find this to be an incredibly impactful way of understanding what's going on in the field. And this is where we sourced a lot of those 2023 trends. So again, this link works. If you're interested in being a member of the community, we would love to have you. But at Orgnostic, we're on a mission to build more humane organizations with the help of people, help of people data. We all know that people analytics can be better. I know it, you know it. Orgnostic is here to try to make us be better. We're starting a movement. I hope you come and join us. So let's jumpstart our people analytics journey together. If you need anything, feel free to reach out to me. I hope you're able to join the lounge. It's also accessible on our website. I hope you're able to take the masterclass. This is my personal email as well. But with that said, within the context of this presentation, I'd love to open it up for questions. And I know I did go through that kind of quickly.
Indeed. Yeah, public, let's ask questions. Thanks for the nice presentation, by the way. Don't see questions in chat. By the way, before we go to questions, I need to make an announcement. The next speaker is going to present on the first stream, and this stream is going to have pause for about 45 minutes. And yeah, I will give a link to the next stream so that you can join there without delays. I guess we have 15 minutes for questions, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, and the next presentation on this neighboring stream starts in time. So yeah, give me a sec. I'll fish out the link. And meanwhile,
do I need to jump over too?
I guess we can keep question session here, and whoever wants to join the discussion.
I'm just asking. I don't know. I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, go with us.
Okay.
So probably my question is, when talking about paywalls and some instruments being not accessible, I guess my biggest question is whether, first of all, I get the value that I pay for. Like, jumping on some bandwagon means some commitment. Like I need to bring the data, bring there some time for learning, bring their resources, like basically making a comfortable environment there, which takes about a week or so, probably sometimes even a month. I know because I have experience trying out different IDEs, like development tools, and trying out different services where you can try before you fully commit. So like for some services, this curve is not so steep, but for some services, it's really like when the trial period ends, it's like you already live there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, probably you can elaborate on your experience and like your services, like how do they handle this?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're actually pretty unique in this regard. So first, I think you're sort of starting off your question talking about the community and how it's free. It's open to everyone, not just Orgnostic customers. And so we want to be all a part of a greater people analytics community. I think that's a really important point to reiterate. What I'll say about our product and our technology in particular, we do something that no other vendor does. And I didn't cover it in the presentation, but we allow you to go in and connect your data via self-service APIs. And again, this is just a few clicks, a few copy and paste, and you can be up and running if you use an HCM or an ATS in our tool in as soon as 30 minutes. And like no other tools offer this. And this is a part of a free trial, which also other tools don't offer. And so we want to make it as easy and as seamless to get people up to speed. Whereas most other tools, you might have a 8-week, 16-week, 24-week implementation period after you've gone through months and months of back and forth with lawyers trying to get some kind of contract signed. You can be up and running in 15 minutes in our tool. And that's a vast difference in terms of time to value. And I think that's really important in times like these where the economics are being challenged, is you've got to be able to show that time to value ratio in a people analytics team favor. And I think it's kind of off kilter at most companies, but at Orgnostic, I think we've done a really good job in this space.
That's true. Do you ask for email password? Like LinkedIn probably asked like about 10 years ago.
No, I mean, you're just creating a free trial account and then you're linking your data for your organization via self-service APIs.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like what kind of authentication? Like probably every organization, especially bigger ones, have policies about sharing the data with third parties.
Sure.
So
well, and we were created in the European Union, and so we are a GDPR compliant native company. We are SOC 2 compliant. We have all the processes in place because we wanted to make it as simple for you to connect your data, but also just as simple to remove your data if you said you no longer want it to be a part of, what we're doing. And so it's a very, very easy process. One thing I can do is I can actually put in the chat a copy of an article I wrote back when I was an Orgnostic customer, and it talks about this to a certain extent. I think that the audience may find it helpful. And I know there's some folks that are on YouTube and other places as well. I'm hopeful that you can share the link with them as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Like being unique in some area is kind of like bless and a curse because people have no expectations to bring with them, right? And
Oh,
they
people
need to
have
learn.
expectations. Every person I
Okay.
talk to has very high expectations of us. The thing is, we're not really in a unique area. Is we're just hobbling up multiple verticals with one company, right? So some organizations might be a listening vendor, another might be a people analytics technology, another might be a data warehousing vendor, and another might be a data science on demand or a workforce planning vendor. We're trying to do all of that in one place. And again, to democratize this process so that anyone who wants to have quick time to value with people analytics can get up to speed, because we know they're getting pressure from their leadership to show value of what the function is doing, because they're all businesses right now are feeling the pressure from economic conditions.
Cool. I have a question.
Yeah. Hit me with it.
We see a lot of firings lately, and from your perspective, how could we prevent cases like Twitter when like people are fired, but then it appears that it's fired some important people that the company couldn't survive without. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think I think that Twitter is kind of an edge case, just considering the context of what's going on. And so I know some folks at that organization, and they're excellent people analytics practitioners. And so I don't think it's appropriate to talk about one particular organization, especially considering what Elon Musk has publicly said he's going to do to the organization. He's like slicing their headcount of the entire company in half, and that's a brute force instrument. But I think the more broad question is, what's going on in society? And we've seen lots of other organizations, tech companies, startups, even some in the more traditional sectors start to see layoffs on people analytics teams. And what can those teams do to be preventative? Well, one is look at the things I talked about in the presentation, which is focusing on things like productivity, cost modeling, building your business acumen, and understanding your employee sentiment so that you can show the linkage of sentiment to company productivity. But the biggest one, and Max Blumberg would kill me if I didn't mention it, is the relationship to business strategy. If you cannot show a direct linkage between what your team is doing and the effectiveness of the business, you definitionally are overhead. And I have this kind of shorthand saying that a profit center is greater than a cost center. And what that means is if you can show that what you're doing, that everything that your team is doing has a tangible and measurable value to the organization executing its business strategy and probably making more money, you are a profit center. You are not a cost center. And therefore, you will be above reproach. Most people analytics teams, and especially during that time period I was talking about, the 2010 to 2020, They were focusing on the novelty items, the newest hot topic. Well, those things don't necessarily focus directly on the top line and bottom line of an organization. And those chickens are coming home to roost in a way right now, where organizations haven't built that muscle memory to focus on the things that businesses care about the most. You've got to be a strategy-led organization, and you can be a strategy-led organization and have that be amplified by the data and the technology that you have. But if you're only focused on the data and the technology, you're not focusing on the strategy.
That's a good thought. Yeah.
Cole, do you know a lot of people analytics teams or people analysts who recently move some part of organization from cost center to profit center?
Not really, no. That's kind of the problem that I think I've identified. I used to, when I led people analytics function, I had an audacious goal for my team where I said, we have to pay for ourselves 10 times over every year. And I always extended it publicly as a challenge to other organizations. And I never ever heard another person take me up on it is, can your team prove, like my team can do, that you're paying for yourselves 10 times over every year? And again, crickets. And so as far as I can tell, most organizations aren't focusing on this as much as they should. And I think we're in a very clear moment where there's a phase shift of what's going on. The economy is forcing the issue, but in reality, what it's going to take is leaders in our field recognizing the problem, making adjustments accordingly, investing in the right technology, and showing that they can bring about the productivity that organizations need at this moment.
Doesn't it look weird because people analysts, people that work with numbers and could prove some gut feelings into numbers or something like that to show like the real value in numbers?
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously it's a scientific discipline, it's a data-driven discipline, but the thing is, you can do data work on things that don't produce value for an organization. That's entirely possible to do. Like you can answer hypotheses for no one, right? And I use no one kind of tongue in cheek. But there's also science and data and execution that lead to fixing actual business problems. And so if you have kind of a decoder ring as work is brought to your team, is this aligned to the business strategy and adding value to the business? Or is this kind of a novelty item or a personal pet project? Well, guess what? If you can decipher between those two things, you can focus your work on the things that are adding value and not doing the things that are just what I call navel gazing.
Yeah, that's true. It's very important to know what the goal is. Then you can filter out the instruments that help you reach the goal and those that just waste your time and resources.
Well, if you're liking the level of authenticity in this presentation, you should absolutely listen to my podcast because this is how every episode is. If anything, it's less buttoned up than this conversation has been, but I imagine this has been sort of a change of pace versus some of the presentations that have happened over the last 2 days.
Indeed, you definitely have a +1 listener.
Yeah, absolutely.
+2.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
I guess plus many. It's just people are being a bit silent in this chat.
Okay, one more question. From tooling point of view, do you see and what do you think about evolving this field in from tooling perspective? Would we see any interesting tools appearing in this domain?
Well, I mean, I would say that Orgnostic is one of the interesting tools that's coming up. Obviously, there's other vendors in this space, and I know lots of people at those vendors.
I mean, tools and features. Maybe you are like preparing some interesting features that will blow our minds.
Yeah, like one of the things that I mentioned earlier, and I kind of glossed over it, but I actually think this is going to fundamentally disrupt the whole talent intelligence space because talent intelligence has been the new buzzword over the last year or 2 years. And it's what I was saying earlier about combining natural language processing of external data sets of culture, combining that with hard data from organizations of the inflows and outflows of talent, and understanding how that those things are having an impact on the stock market and revenue indicators from all organizations. We plan to productize a tool that does this for you. That's going to be what I would call the first true talent intelligence tool. It's not just about finding that one recruiter or the one software engineer that's in Hong Kong that no one else knows about, or doing an inventory of the skills in your organization. It's about being able to see every aspect of the market, to run scientific experiments to show, if I were to change this in my organization, how would that impact my industry and the overall revenue of my organization in a causal way. I think it's fundamentally going to be a disruptive tool. It's still very much in its infancy right now, but I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, sounds like you have a vision, and that's very important to have one.
Well, it's not just my vision. Our founders, Luka and Igor, they are based in Serbia. Luka studied at Harvard. Igor has exited 2 other startups in the bioinformatics space. Very innovative folks. We have an excellent team, and we're disproportionately investing, not in sales and marketing, not in the side of the business. We're investing in engineering, data science, and product. And that's all for you guys. It's because we want to make the best product that's ever existed in people analytics. We're not there yet, but we're going to be there.
That's nice. By the way, important announcement. The presentation on the neighboring track is going to start soon. So if you don't want to miss it, please join the link. And if you're interested in our discussion, please stay. I see a question in the chat. I can read it aloud, or I believe you also can see it, right?
Yeah, I'll read it aloud so everyone can hear. I see Orgnostic offers survey capability. How are these surveys different or similar to other vendors like Peakon or Qualtrics? Well, to be honest, a survey is just a survey sometimes. And so in some ways, we're very similar, and it can be somewhat commoditized. But I would say one of the things that's unique about what we do is every survey that we run is valid based on validated scientific constructs from the academic literature. Right. And so these are inherently benchmarkable because most of them have been used for, 25, 20, 15 years in the scientific disciplines that are out there in this space. And the second is, none of those tools that this person mentioned natively integrate with a people analytics technology. Therefore, in my mind, you have people data over here and you have contextual data based on your listening over here, and the two don't talk to one another. Ours natively talk to one another and contextualize, like that chart I showed earlier that showed the employee lifetime value and the employee life cycle at the same time. I mean, I kicked myself. Back when I was an Orgnostic customer, I saw that chart. I was like, why didn't I think of this myself? This is brilliant. It was waiting to happen. Orgnostic capitalized on it. And none of these other vendors are really looking in that space. So it's a very, very exciting time.
Yeah. By the way, one of the aspects of the surveys for me is the user experience that you have when you're filling them. And like one thing is when someone calls you after some experience and asks to answer some questions. And it's completely another story when you are relaxed and have some time, like, for example, in anticipation of a movie, for example, that is going to start in 5 to 10 minutes. And instead of watching some ads, you can have an option of socializing with neighbors around you and answer some questions, probably in a conversational form. Like, I would say this is 2 completely different experiences, and it would lead to 2 completely different qualities of the data you get from the survey.
Well, let me talk about one thing real quick, and I'll tie it back to what you were saying. Is one of the things that we also don't do is we are not a dashboarding tool. I feel like a lot of these tools just create dashboards. One of the things that we do is we give people the data they need to understand something in a visual format, but we're actually investing heavily in natural language processing so that it automatically, in plain English, writes out the insight for a user so that they don't have to come to the conclusion themselves. And that's really important. And so some folks call that narrative insights. We're very invested in narrative insights with our platform. So I think it kind of links to what you're saying. In terms of our surveys, I'll be honest with you, they're very quantitative heavy right now. We're investing in doing more open-ended based type topics to get into that narrative space. It's kind of an immature part of our function right now, but we have a very mature surveying practice on the quantitative side. But again, it's kind of, you have to kind of choose what's more important to you as an organization at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Cole. I think we do not have any other questions. It was really amazing presentation. I really enjoyed it. Here you are one of the leader of the space, definitely, and it was really interesting to hear your insights and see your vision of the future. So
Yeah,
thank you for the
please
presentation.
feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me. I put my email address in there earlier, and listen to the podcast, but check out Orgnostic, join the lounge, do the masterclass, get involved, because people analytics is going to disrupt the future.
We are gonna resend your certification and your podcast to 800 of our subscription list. So I think there would be more listeners.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming.
The pleasure is mutual.